So this is Spellbinder with this very update of what happened in 2012. Is nothing that wasn't expected because it happened before several times. This is supplemental material for 2012 presentation radio interview. Warning adults only, but that's what it will say. It says note on numbers. This discussion deals with numbers at a very deep level of both symbolism and mathematics. Many of the numbers referenced are astronomical cycles. In the most cases, numbers are not whole numbers, but rather certain specific fractional parts. These fractional parts are very, very important, and they are one of the primary keys to decoding the warning to us now from the past civilizations. However, these fractional parts of numbers tend to get in the way of the general concept discussion here, so please note that these fractional parts are very important, but not for this discussion, and mostly are left out for the use of numbers. All such fractional parts are referred to as FP. Where necessary, all such fractional parts are detailed within the source material book cited. An example of an important fractional part number for illustration is polar field of the sun rotates each day at 9.729729 degrees. Note the repetitious pattern of 972. Equatorial fields of the sun rotate each day 13.84615 degrees. Both fractional parts are important. See source material cited. Beginning. Okay, I am looking at it this way. Things meaning the times we live in are damn strange and getting stranger by the minute. Not only are the powers that be running around building end-of-the-world seed vaults, they are also privately and in groups buying up large amounts of farmland up in the very high altitude places and trying to shove swine flu vaccine up everyone's snout. Then there is these issues of the rapid and oscillating climate changes here on Earth, as well as the alterations of the climate in all the other planets in the solar system, and there are the tremendous changes in our sun over this last decade, which continue. Then there are various huge levels of changes to the Earth itself, such as giant earthquakes, resulting tsunamis, and other indications of major changes, such as global glacial melt. To shorten this huge list of things wrong with these strange times, suffice to say that everything from the health of the oceans and the atmosphere to the behavior of the self-appointed ruling elite is all screwed up, and that brings us to 2012, not simply the end of the Mayan long count calendar, but also a central focus of number codes and dozens of ancient myths and actually span the planet. 2012 end date seemingly puts the capstone on our pyramid of change notable of these remaining days prior to the winter solstice, December 21st, 2012, noting that the world's solstice, meaning to stand still, actually describes a specific astronomical event, which is 3-day time which the sun appears to rise in exactly the same spot on the horizon. It is curious indeed that the long count, the Mayan calendar, actually Mesoamerican cultures would end on that day. It is also curious that the Pope Gregory of the Gregorian calendar fame would have the long count actually end at 11:11 on that day. Also curious is that the numeral reference sums to 11, 12, 21, 12 equals 11. These curiosities arise due to the encoding of knowledge into number patterns. As an instance of the number 11 at its base level of symbolism refers to the sunspot cycle, which is 11 some fractional parts years in length. Conclusion. Where are we going wrong? Where were we wrong earlier? It is the sunspot cycle that concerns us humans and other critters here on Earth. The reason is that the universe is composed of cycles within cycles within cycles at levels and complexities we may barely be able to perceive. These cycles include large cycles based on smaller cycles. One of these smaller cycles is our local sunspot cycle. While our work here at Half Past Human has shown indications of the sun disease since 1997, and this reference was to a disease of the sun rather than a disease caused in Earth's life by the sun. Within our data sets, this language fell under the set of what we call the big squeeze. This label was applied due to the many repeated references to magnetics gone wrong in our data. It was our theory that the cause for the big squeeze was the alignment of the Earth and the Sun to the center of the Milky Way galaxy, which is coincident with 2012. This necessitated the idea of new forms of energy from extrasolar system sources in order to explain all the changes in the local planets of our Sun. Such an understanding is wrong. There is an understanding that provides for the current change in the planets and the Sun. That does not require any external source of energy. This understanding has to do with the totally with the sunspot cycle and what causes them when the larger cycles build upon them. The material below is based on the book by Patrick Gurel, including Orion Prophecy and How to Survive 2012 when the world cataclysm 2012, may be obtained at this website. Gurel bases some of his work on the decoding of the Maurice Cottiel's work in the Mayan prophecies. I am of opinion that Cottiel's work does support Gurel's sunspot cycle contentions, and that Cottiel did not take the symbolism far enough to reach the same conclusion as Gurel. Further, in my research into Vedic and pre-Vedic Hindu and Pali literature, as well as Taoist and pre-Chang Buddhism Chinese myth, I have found the same numeric coding exists in these widely dispersed cultures, and that these numeric codings are of the same nature as Gurel has decoded in the Mayan and Egyptian symbolism. Unfortunately, there is also very substantial science-based analysis supporting the ideal that the planet Earth has repeated and periodic episodes of crustal displacement, some significant and civilization-shattering levels. Hapgood, The Path of the Poles, and other researchers have found historical and geographic evidence for hundreds if not thousands of such pole shifts and crustal shifts. Also, the ancient Chinese texts refer to 4 previous world-changing cataclysms, and the Mayans also have a 4th age of the world ending in their long count calendar, and the Egyptian pharaohs refer to 8 such occurrences, while the Narmer plate details 11 previous crustal shifts. The Vedic and the pre-Vedic reference only to 4 worlds or kingdoms destroyed each time by the world-altering cataclysms. So there is ample evidence that the poles of all parts together under the ideal of periodic crustal and pole shifts here on Earth. The graphics below will provide a proof for concepts, illustrations to the brief discussion showing the mechanism that, if not crustal or causal, at least participates in shifts. Please note all factual parts of numbers referenced have been dropped for clarity. These numbers can be obtained in Gurel's books. To start, it is necessary to understand that our Sun is 99% of all the mass in the solar system, but only 1% of the angular momentum, whereas the reverse is true, that is, all the planets have only 1% of the mass, but have 99% of the angular momentum. This ideal is important as it explains why the Sun spins in 2 different speeds. Both Mayan and Egyptian civilization knew that the poles of the Sun take 37 days to rotate, and the equator of the Sun takes only 26 days. Note that we are leaving off the fractional parts. It is also worth noting that this information can only, as far as we can tell, be determined if you are a spacefaring civilization. So how did the ancient cultures know this? Anyway, due to the pull of the planets on the equator of the Sun, the equator spins faster than the solar pole. As a result, every 87 days the equator laps the poles of the Sun. It is also this basic motion that is responsible for the sunspot cycle, as well as other much more dramatic cycles in the Sun's behavior. Note that no attempt to scale or complexity is used in the following illustrations. Our Sun is a giant magnetically based electric generator, the electric universe theory. As the angular momentum of the planets pull on the Sun's equator, it also pulls upon and distorts the magnetic force within the Sun. This tug from the planet takes 1 complete lap every 87 days. The effect of this is a winding of the magnetic forces within the Sun. From this Sun's north to south pole, this effect, if we could see magnetic lines of force, would resemble a swastika symbol. This is an important note, as all ancient civilizations of this planet used the swastika as a symbol of the core of all their end-time myths. This symbol did not originate with the Nazi movement in Germany and was deliberately chosen by them due to its fundamental importance to humanity and civilization. As each arm of the magnetic winding crawls up the surface of the Sun, it will pass the magic number of 19.45 degrees of latitude. This number is magic, and as that is where the sunspots happen, and coincidentally where all the storms happen on the gas giants. And such interesting places as Hawaii happen here on Earth. This number is magic, as it is also the point in which the internal hyperdimension Merkaba, interlinked tetrahedrons, will contact the edge of the sphere we perceive as the Sun. The sunspot cycle is so named as this point of contact between the Merkaba and the manifesting reality of the Sun's surface is where the sunspots develop. The sunspots are the heart of the Sun. What is the pulse to the heart of a human? to continue as the winding pressure increases the sun over time. Each 87-day lap, a large structure of magnetic pressure is created both internally and externally to the sun. This larger pressure builds within the huge forces tugging on the magnetic structure of the sun over a period in excess of 11,500 years. As a result of the pressure, this level of chaotic tension in the magnetic structure of the sun, as the pressure bend the magnetic arms of the sun and they crawl up the sun like windings of a string around a ball, they will cross the 19.45 latitude. If they happen to do so when the internal rotation of the Merkaba is coinciding, a sunspot will form, and it will continue as long as the winding arm is synchronized and with the rotation, usually about 25 days or so. As the force pressure of the magnetic structure of the sun increases with time, the pressure can naturally be expected to build until the breaking point is reached. All the ancient warnings via the myths and symbols point to the breaking point of the sunspot cycle as the key indicator of pending pole and crustal shifts here on Earth as well as the other planets. The reason that the pressure on the magnetic structure of the sun results in a pole and crustal shift here on Earth is due to our own planet's magnetic nature. Our planet is basically a dirt and water covered magnetic generator similar to the core of the sun. The magnetic health of our planet is directly tied to the sun. As noted worthy fact, the magnetosphere protecting our Earth has weakened constantly these last 10,000 years. No longer healthy in this above graphic, the magnetosphere is both weak and full of holes and is growing over the last few years. As the sun's magnetic structure nears its breaking point relative to the pressure exerted by the angular momentum, it will expand in a spherical fashion towards outward as the 11, there is that number again, centuries of stress are blown off. The following graphics illustrate this process. And this is the graphics to it. Any resemblance between these illustrations and recent crop circles is entirely a meaningful coincidence manifestation of reality. As may be expected, having the magnetic sphere of the sun expand and bulge out past the orbit of the inner planets likely will have an impact on Earth since we are one of the inner planets. Thinking that this magnetic bow wave will be followed by a coronal mass ejection, CME, which is what the powers that be seem to be afraid to encounter. However, the real danger of the planet comes from the magnetic bow wave itself, especially when we have diminished and weakened the magnetosphere. And you can see what it will do. The impact of the magnetic discharge from the sun will overwhelm what is left of the Earth's protected magnetosphere and initiate both a pole and a crustal shift. Details of these processes may be found in Gurel's books. The effect will be profound. As the inner core of the Earth rotates due to the impacting magnetic solar discharge, the actual physical alignment of the Earth will change from our current position. Per shift, the pole will move from here and there. Potential post shift will move to, well, Australia and, or actually North Pole, they'll move over towards Alaska, and they will end up here, and the South Pole will end up near Australia. Coincidentally curious, huh? The pyramids at the Giza Plateau are in the same center of the planetary landmass. This begs the question of why, as a marker perhaps as to the center of rotation of the planets under such circumstances as a free-floating crust, bearing in mind that there is no down in space when the crust of the Earth rotates. Its position and point of rotation will be determined by the gravity as determined by what the object in space is closest to the center of mass of the Earth, conveniently marked by the Giza pyramids. The two candidates that we have specifically affect our rotation are the moon, the sun, and although smaller, the moon is closest, and if that may be primarily determined or how these periodic crustal spins resolve themselves. Summation, I cannot finish this, but I will post this link at the bottom of the video, and you will be able to read the rest of this and be able to find out what's really happening and why the government don't care and the world leaders don't care about the rest of the population, because they got themselves an ark to go to, like in the movie 2012 most likely, or something. They're buying high ground. They're putting seed vaults in. There's got to be a reason, folks. Until next time, this is Spellbinder. Be good or be good at it and survive.